Hi there, I'm Marissa. When I was 16, my mom believed a lie so cruel, it shattered everything I thought I knew about love. She accused me of something I never did, kicked me out into the cold night without even looking back. But that was just the beginning. What kind of family turns betrayal into survival? Before we dive in, have you ever trusted someone, only to find out they were the ones who broke you? The heater buzzed in the corner, but the cold had already claimed the night. I sat on the edge of my bed, the blanket twisted between my fingers, while the snow outside thickened against the window. Downstairs, voices crashed against the walls, sharp, frantic, wild in a way I hadn't heard since before we lost Dad to his silence. The slam of a door echoed up the staircase, heavy footsteps, then lighter ones. My heart stuttered. I tightened the blanket closer to my chest as the knob twisted. "Mom?" Janine burst into my room. Her face was carved from rage, her hand stretched out, holding Clarissa's underwear like it was Exhibit A in a courtroom drama no one told me I was starring in. "You disgusting little freak," she hissed. "How could you?" I blinked, staring at the fabric in her hand. Words jammed in my throat, too thick and too hot to come out. My mind spun, reaching for an answer that didn't exist because none of this made sense. Clarissa stood behind Mom, tiny and pale, her wide eyes darting between us like she might vanish if she stood still long enough. Bryce leaned casually against the door frame, arms folded, a smirk flickering across his mouth. "No," I finally croaked. I didn't." Mom threw the underwear at me. It hit my chest and fell to the floor, a soft, damning thud. "You've been eyeing her, haven't you?" she snarled. "You think I'm blind?" I shook my head so hard the room blurred. "I swear I didn't." Bryce clicked his tongue against his teeth. "I caught her once," he said, voice oily. She was staring. It was creepy. A memory slashed through me. Earlier that day, Bryce brushing past me near my dresser, knocking into me hard enough to make me stumble. I hadn't thought much of it then. Now it cracked open into something uglier. Planted. Set up. "No," I whispered. "No, he—" "Get out!" Mom's voice cracked the ceiling, the walls, the fragile bones of everything I thought I understood about love. I stood on autopilot. My hands grabbed my school backpack, still half filled with notebooks and broken pens. Nobody helped me. Clarissa flinched when I moved. Rachel, Bryce's girlfriend, who had once painted my nails at sleepovers, looked away. The door slammed so hard behind me, the whole house shook. I stumbled into the snow, the cold slicing through my jacket, cutting into my skin. I stood there, shivering, staring at the glowing windows where my life used to be. The street was empty. The world was too big. My breath fogged in the air, fragile and disappearing. "I didn't even know what I did wrong," I whispered, but there was no one left to hear it. Fade to black. The night swallowed me whole as I walked, the snow crunching softly beneath my torn sneakers. My jacket, too thin for the Vermont winter, clung to my skin like a second, colder layer of shame. The streetlights blurred into smudges of gold against the dark sky, and I replayed the scene over and over in my mind, each time hoping it would change, each time landing harder on the same brutal ending. Was it possible? Had I done something wrong? Had I missed some signal, some warning that this was coming? I tucked my chin deeper into my chest, trying to block the cold, trying to block the doubts gnawing at me from the inside out. And then, out of nowhere, a memory surged forward, jagged, sharp, undeniable. That afternoon, Bryce brushing against me in the hallway, his hand awkwardly bumping the edge of my dresser. I hadn't thought much of it then, but now, standing under the hollow buzz of a dying street lamp, the pieces fell into place with a sickening click. I remembered finding my diary open on my bed a few days ago. I hadn't written in it for weeks, my mind too cluttered, my days too dull, but there it was, flipped to a page I didn't recognize. Words I didn't remember writing, words that painted me as something sick, something obsessed, something broken. I wish she would notice me. I wish I could touch her hair, her skin, be close to her forever. The handwriting was almost perfect. Almost. Just enough to fool anyone not looking closely. Just enough to condemn me. My knees buckled, and I sat down hard on the curb, letting the snow seep through my jeans. My heart twisted, pulling tight until my chest ached. They hadn't just accused me. They had built the crime for me, brick by brick, word by word. Maybe if I had been better, quieter, prettier, less strange, maybe they wouldn't have needed to invent a reason to hate me. I squeezed my eyes shut against the tears burning there, but they leaked out anyway, carving hot trails down my freezing cheeks. Inside the Holloway kitchen, Bryce's voice would have been a low hiss. Mom would have been hunched over the sink, the weight of worry already etched into her spine. "You saw how she looked at Clarissa," he would say, smooth and sure. "You know what she's capable of." Maybe Mom's hand would tremble. Maybe she would search for some memory, some truth that could save me. Maybe she would come up empty. Because fear is louder than love. Always. A car passed slowly down the street, spraying slush onto my shoes. I didn't move. I didn't care. My home wasn't behind me anymore. It wasn't anywhere. Eventually, I found shelter at an abandoned bus stop. The bench was cracked, the metal roof barely holding back the falling snow. I curled into myself, wrapping my arms around my knees, pretending my body was smaller, less visible, less everything. It would have been so easy to go back, to knock on the door, to fall to my knees and beg for forgiveness for things I hadn't done, to promise to be better, quieter, easier to love. But I didn't move. I sat there, listening to the wind scrape against the glass, feeling the frostbite kiss my skin. Maybe I was never meant to be loved by them. Tears froze on my cheeks, tiny monuments to a life I could never return to. The basement smelled like old hymn books and cold stone. I curled up on a pew someone had abandoned, tucking my arms under my jacket. It was silent, save for the occasional groan of the wind sliding through the cracks in the boarded windows. I had never felt so far away from myself, like I had become a shadow that even the night forgot. I replayed the last family dinner in my head, the small flickers I hadn't noticed until now. Bryce leaning back in his chair, casual as ever, tossing a lazy comment into the air like a knife he didn't expect anyone to catch. "Family comes first," he said, smiling thinly. "Not risks." I remembered Mom's face, how she didn't even blink. She just kept eating, her lips pressed into a line so tight they almost disappeared. She hadn't defended me. She hadn't even looked at me. Maybe I was already gone to them then. Maybe the night they threw me out was just the formality. Sometimes you don't lose love in a flash of shouting and slammed doors. Sometimes it rots, quietly day by day, like a house with termites, still standing long after it's been hollowed out. When the morning broke through the frozen haze, I stumbled out onto the street, my legs stiff, my head pounding with a different kind of cold. At the town hall, where people gathered for the winter bazaar, I moved like a ghost. No one met my eyes. No one smiled. Rumors swirled like the snow that never seemed to melt. I caught fragments as I drifted past clusters of neighbors. Such a shame. But you know, better safe than sorry. I heard she had problems. Poor Janine. Imagine finding that out about your own daughter. Janine stood among them, a pillar of forced grief. She didn't deny anything. She didn't correct a single lie. She just nodded, the perfect portrait of a mother burdened with impossible tragedy. I couldn't breathe. It wasn't just my family that had decided I was a stain to be scrubbed out. It was everyone. Every teacher who averted their gaze, every neighbor who turned their back, every friend who now crossed the street when they saw me coming. Later, sitting outside the diner, I pressed my forehead against the frosted glass. Inside, the world I used to belong to went on without me. My old classmates laughed over pancakes and coffee, the light warm on their faces. The air inside looked so soft, so easy. I watched them until my breath fogged the glass and blurred them out of sight. I wasn't just abandoned by my family. I was abandoned by my entire world. The gate to Holloway High creaked as the wind nudged it open and shut. I stood on the sidewalk, my hands jammed into my pockets, watching the kids pour out in clusters. Laughter filled the air, floating higher than the gray clouds pressing down on the town. I pressed my forehead against the iron bars, the cold biting my skin. It wasn't just my home that turned its back on me. It was everything I once trusted. I stepped inside the courtyard, boots crunching on the salt scattered over the ice. Everything looked the same: the cracked fountain, the red brick walls, The faded banners from last year's sports season. Except for me. I didn't belong here anymore. I remembered the meeting with Principal Lawson. I had stood in front of his massive desk, fingers trembling, clutching my shredded dignity like it could save me. I told him everything. The lies, the planted evidence, the things I couldn't explain but knew were wrong. He didn't even look at me when he spoke. "It's best if you move on quietly," he said, tapping his pen against the desk. "This town values peace. Not truth, not justice, just peace." The message was clear. My pain wasn't worth scratching the glossy surface they all polished so carefully. I wandered past the school board's bulletin, papers flapping weakly in the wind. Congratulations for scholarships, sports trophies, drama club victories. My name, once pinned proudly there, had vanished without a trace. I wasn't a warning. I wasn't a lesson. I was a ghost no one wanted to admit had ever existed. Weeks later, desperation pushed me back to the house I used to call home. Snow crusted the lawn and cars lined the driveway. A garage sale. I froze at the curb, heart rattling against my ribs. Old toys, books, picture frames with my face still tucked behind cracked glass, laid out on card tables for strangers to paw through. I moved closer, drawn like a moth to a flame. I reached out for a battered sketch pad, pages curling from moisture. I remembered drawing those pictures, sprawled on the living room carpet, feeling safe, feeling wanted. Someone else grabbed it before I could. A woman I didn't recognize, flipping through the pages without a second thought, tossing it into a pile marked 50 cents. I stumbled back, my legs giving out. The sidewalk was hard and unyielding under my knees, but I hardly noticed. Then I saw it. On the folding table closest to the garage door, my mother's locket. The one she used to wear every Sunday. The one she swore would someday be mine. I scrambled up, lunging toward it, but a man in a Red Sox jacket snatched it first, flipping a crumpled dollar onto the table without a glance. "Hey!" My voice cracked, raw and useless. He didn't even hear me. I watched him walk away, the locket swinging from his fingers. I stayed there, sitting on the frozen concrete, as strangers dismantled the last pieces of me for pocket change. Even my memories weren't safe. The thrift store window was streaked with grime, but through it, I spotted flashes of my old life. A pink sweater I had worn to my 10th birthday party. A second-place spelling bee trophy with my name half scraped off. A cracked photo frame still holding a picture of me and Clarissa, smiling before we knew how fast smiles could turn into scars. I stepped inside. The bell above the door jangled, and the musty scent of old fabric and forgotten lives swallowed me whole. There, tucked between a stack of battered romance novels, was an envelope. My name, written in a hand that trembled even when it was steady. Mom's handwriting. My real mom. Not the woman who sold me out for peace and reputation, but the one who used to kiss my forehead and sing lullabies about stars and dreams. The letter was stained, water damaged, the ink bleeding in places like a wound refusing to heal. A bright orange sticker was slapped across the top. $1. I reached for it, hands shaking. A man in a leather jacket reached first. He didn't even glance at it before tossing it into his basket, along with a cracked vase and a chipped clock. "Please," I said, my voice cracking like ice. He didn't hear me, or maybe he chose not to. He moved on, humming to himself. I stood there, frozen in place, watching him walk away with the last thread connecting me to the part of my life that hadn't been poisoned. Outside, the sidewalk was wet and gritty. I collapsed onto it, feeling the roughness tear at my jeans, not caring. Tears slid down my cheeks, hot against the freezing air. I didn't sob. I didn't scream. I just let it happen. I realized then that no matter how hard I had tried, how quiet or good or invisible I had been, it had never been enough, and it never would be. I pressed my forehead against my knees and whispered into the damp fabric, "I will never ask them for love again." It was a vow, and it rooted itself deep in the hollow spaces inside me. Weeks later, the school held its winter fundraiser, a carnival of lights and laughter. I watched from the far side of the parking lot, tucked into the shadows. Bryce was there, spinning his usual stories, dropping half-truths and full lies into the ears of every parent, every teacher, every coach. He spoke with the ease of someone who knew he would never be questioned. "She's troubled," he said once, loud enough for me to hear across the cold night air. It's sad, really, but we had to act for everyone's safety. Janine stood next to him, nodding along, her face a portrait of quiet suffering. The words wrapped around me like a noose. At the bake sale table, Mrs. Weaver, my old math teacher, avoided my gaze. Mr. Thomas, who once praised my essays, whispered with his wife and looked away when I caught his eye. I wasn't just a girl who lost her family. I was a warning. Later that night, I found myself standing at the edge of Holloway Lake. The surface was frozen, a sheet of cracked glass under the heavy dark. I toed the edge with the tip of my shoe, wondering how thick the ice really was, wondering if it would hold me or if it would finally let me fall. The wind whipped my hair into my face. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Maybe it's better if no one remembers me at all." The lake said nothing back. I stood on the cracked sidewalk outside her house, the cold biting through the holes in my sneakers. My hand hovered near the doorbell for a moment before I knocked, soft at first, then harder. Lights flickered off inside. A curtain shifted just slightly before snapping closed. I knocked again, harder this time. Silence answered. I wrapped my arms around myself and stepped back, staring at the familiar porch where we had once spent summers making friendship bracelets and swearing we'd always have each other's backs. Now it was just another door slammed shut in my face. As I turned away, the sting of humiliation fresh and raw, a memory flashed. Sleepovers filled with whispered dreams, flashlight secrets under the covers, promises scribbled in glitter pens that friendship was forever. I spotted her the next day across the street from the town library. She saw me too and crossed to the other side without hesitation. No words, no hesitation, just distance. Later, when I sat hunched over a library computer, I saw the post. "Protect your children. Some dangers don't wear masks." It wasn't directed at me by name. It didn't have to be. They had made it clear. I was not one of them. At the Holloway house, the cold was a different kind. Bryce sat at the kitchen table, tapping his fingers against the wood, a lazy rhythm meant to fill the silence. Janine stood at the sink, washing the same plate over and over, her shoulders tense. Clarissa sat across from them, looking smaller than I remembered. She twisted a napkin in her lap, her eyes darting between them like a rabbit sensing a snare. "You don't want to end up like her," Bryce said softly, his words slipping into the cracks of her fear. Janine didn't say anything. She didn't have to. The threat hung heavy in the kitchen like smoke. Clarissa folded. I felt it the next day at school. Her footsteps avoided mine, her voice lowered when I walked by. The glances she once threw me across crowded hallways were gone, replaced by a wall I couldn't scale. Standing outside under the brittle autumn sky, leaves crumbling around my feet, I realized something important. The girl they had raised to bend and beg was dead. I wasn't going to survive by holding on to broken promises. I was going to survive by remembering everything they wanted me to forget. Later that afternoon, I spotted Clarissa at the end of the main hallway. She was standing near her locker, laughing at something a classmate said. Her gaze lifted, met mine across the sea of faces, and faltered. She turned quickly, disappearing into the crowd. I stared after her, a strange emptiness spreading through my chest. Trust. It's just another blade. The library smelled like old glue and dust. I sat in the farthest corner, clutching a stack of yellowed letters to my chest. They were letters Clarissa had written years ago, back when we thought sisterhood was unbreakable, when promises were sealed with pinky swears and whispered in the dark. The ink had blurred under my tears, smearing the words that once tethered me to something safe. I unfolded the last letter, fingers trembling, reading her shaky scrawl. No matter what happens, we'll always have each other. Lies. Memory gnawed at the edges of my mind. Clarissa sitting at the Holloway kitchen table, her hands clenched tight in her lap. Janine standing over her, sliding a thin sheet of paper across the wood. Family loyalty agreement. Sign it or lose everything. College, home, security, Clarissa had signed. Her guilt swallowed by fear, survival, necessity. I crumpled the letter into my palm. The betrayal was complete. Not with screaming or fights or slammed doors, but with quiet, paper-thin choices that shredded what little was left of me. A week later, whispers crept through town like mist. She's coming to dinner. They're trying to forgive her, you know. Poor Holloways, trying so hard to heal after everything she did. An unexpected call came. I stared at the name flashing across my cracked phone screen. Mom. I let it ring until the voicemail clicked over. Her voice floated through, syrupy and trembling. Marissa, sweetheart, we want to see you. Please come to dinner Sunday. It's time to make things right. The small girl inside me, bruised and battered, wanted to believe it. Wanted to run into their arms and hear them say they had been wrong. But the woman I had become knew better. This wasn't about love. It was about control, about optics, about cleaning up their mess. I stood outside the library's glass window, my reflection fractured by raindrops sliding down the pane. My face looked older than I remembered, not just from time, but from all the cracks they had carved into me. I touched the glass lightly, like I could touch that other girl, the one who still believed family was unconditional. If they want a performance, I whispered to the empty library behind me, I'll give them one. I smiled, thin and cold, and turned away, heart armored for the final act they didn't know was coming. The coffee shop hummed with low conversations and the hiss of steaming milk. I sat alone at a corner table, my fingers curled around a chipped mug of lukewarm tea. Through the window, I watched them. Janine, Bryce, Clarissa, clustered around a table near the door, laughing a little too loudly, smiling a little too hard. Everything about the scene felt wrong. Their laughter was brittle, like glass ready to crack. Their glances too quick, their postures too stiff. The door jingled as I stepped inside, the cold air trailing behind me like a second shadow. I slid into the empty seat they had left for me. Clarissa's hands fidgeted with her napkin, tearing it into little white shreds. Janine leaned forward, her voice syrupy. We're so happy you came, sweetheart. I nodded, saying nothing, waiting for the performance to unfold. It didn't take long. In the middle of a forced conversation about old memories, Clarissa's voice cracked through the tension, too loud, too raw. We just thought if you came back, she said, it would look better for everyone. The words hung in the air like smoke. Silence swallowed the table. Janine's smile froze. Bryce's eyes narrowed. Clarissa paled, realizing too late what she had revealed. I didn't react, didn't flinch, just looked at Clarissa, steady and silent, feeling the final thread between us snap cleanly in two. Later that night, the town bar buzzed with drunken laughter and clinking glasses. Bryce sat at the center of it all, red-faced and loud, basking in the attention. Yeah, he said, voice slurred. We had to set her up. She was always trouble, had to make sure no one would believe her. A mutual acquaintance I barely knew overheard it. They sent me a message through a burner account, attaching an audio clip. No words, just truth, ugly and undeniable. I stared at my phone until the screen dimmed. A few minutes later, another buzz. This time it was a text, from Bryce himself. Don't worry, she totally bought it. One step closer to cleaning this mess. Meant for Janine. Sent to me. The silence inside me didn't crack this time. It calcified. They didn't just abandon me. They buried me. I didn't cry, didn't scream. I simply deleted the message, sliding my phone into my pocket. I stood from my chair, the scraping of wood against tile impossibly loud in the quiet room. I walked to the door, hand steady as I pushed it open. Outside, the night was cold and endless. I smiled to myself, small and sharp. Now it's my turn, I whispered to the wind. The sun was barely a smear across the horizon when I turned onto the last stretch of road leading out of town. The sky was pale orange, the color of endings and beginnings blurred together. My hands gripped the steering wheel, steady for the first time in what felt like years. I slowed as I neared the old Holloway house, its skeleton crouched against the rising light. The porch sagged under the weight of years. The windows were cracked, the garden long since swallowed by weeds. It was strange how things could rot quietly when no one cared enough to hold them together. I didn't pull into the driveway. I didn't get out. I just sat there, engine idling, watching from a distance. Flashes of memories surfaced, threading through the cold morning air. Mom's tight-lipped smiles, Bryce's calculating glances, Clarissa's eyes flickering with guilt before they flickered away. Silent dinners where words were knives. Nights spent curled under thin blankets, pretending the walls weren't caving in. Maybe they didn't mean to destroy me. Maybe they simply didn't care enough not to. I drove on. At the bridge that marked the edge of town, I pulled over. The river below churned with the melt of winter, brown and restless. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the broken locket I had salvaged from a garage sale months ago. The clasp was snapped, the photo inside blurred from moisture. Still, I had clung to it, the way you cling to a lie you need to believe. I held it over the railing for a long moment. Then I let it go. It tumbled once, twice, before vanishing into the current without a splash, without a goodbye. The ache didn't leave. It never would, but it lightened, just enough. The new town was 2 hours east, a place no one knew my name, no one whispered my history. The apartment was tiny, a third-floor walk-up with a cracked kitchen tile, and a heater that rattled like it was coughing out its last breath. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I unpacked slowly, just a few books, a worn quilt, a cheap houseplant already leaning sideways. I lined the windowsill with little things that didn't carry the weight of a past I no longer owed anything to. I wasn't healed. Healing wasn't a door you walked through and found yourself whole again. Healing was a road you walked with stones in your shoes, sometimes smiling, sometimes limping, but walking forward anyway. I stood in the center of the empty living room, breathing in the quiet, letting it settle around me. I didn't know if the wound would ever close. Maybe it didn't have to. When I opened the door to pick up the last box the delivery guy had left, I found a letter on the floor. No return address. Just 6 words on the front in plain, looping handwriting. To the girl who survived. I picked it up carefully, like it might dissolve if I wasn't gentle enough. For the first time in years, I smiled. Small, real. A thing stitched together with stubborn threads of hope. And maybe, just maybe, surviving was enough. Sometimes survival doesn't look like triumph. It looks like simply choosing yourself when no one else will. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that healing isn't about forgetting what broke you. It's about carrying those cracks with grace, knowing they shaped you but never defined you. We don't always get the apologies we deserve. Sometimes we must become our own closure. What about you? Have you ever had to walk away from something you wished you could fix? How did it change you? If this story resonated with you, let's connect. Comment 1 inch if you've ever found strength in letting go, or tell me where you're tuning in from. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you didn't vibe with this story, share why. I'm always listening. If you enjoyed this story and it touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more powerful journeys just like this one. Your next story is waiting.